So, welcome to our July webinar. My name is Terry Lynn Morrison. I am the executive director at Luminary. I'm a Mi'kmaq from the East Coast, so home to me is Listuguj. But I am joining you today from Treaty 6 territory out here in Edmonton, so a little ways from home, but I'm very excited to be going back to my homeland in a couple of days. Welcome. Before we get started, I just want to get into a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we're gathering from many Indigenous territories across Turtle Island, and we invite each of you to learn about whose land you're joining from and to share that in the chat. It's always a great way to see where everybody's coming from across the country. So if you wish to do so, please say hello and share where you're joining from today. Part of what we do here at Luminary is funded in by our partners. We have our Royal Bank of Canada, who is one of our important partners supporting the work that we're doing, and we're also funded from the Government of Canada under their Strategic Science Fund. So they've allowed us to do some of the program delivery that we've been doing since 2024 up until 2029, and we're looking for a renewal on that. But yeah, thanks to their generous support, we are here today. And I'm very excited to get into the content of our presentation. So, joining me today, I have three distinguished Indigenous scholars. We will hear from Aimee Rodriguez, who is from the University of North Dakota. We also have Dr. Tasha Brooks, who is the senior research lead here with us at Luminary and also, I think, assistant professor, right, Tasha, at Royal Roads University. And then Dr. Sherry Mattice, who is out of the beautiful University of Victoria. She is coming in she's out in the woods today, out in the bush, but she's going to do her best to join us a little bit later on. We will kick things off with Aimee. But yeah, really happy to have these wonderful women here today to present. I'll just go over quickly the agenda in terms of the flow of the webinar. So we are doing the welcoming and opening remarks. Tasha is going to talk a bit about Luminary's Indigenous Innovation Scholars Advisory Circle, a group that we work with here over at Luminary and the composition of it and what they're doing and working on. Then we will hear from Aimee Rodriguez Lewis, who is going to talk about the Turtle Island perspective. So this is a bit of research that she's working on. And then we'll be followed by Dr. Sherry Mattice and Dr. Tasha Brooks, who are going to talk about funding futures First Nation post-secondary support policy in British Columbia. So this is some really exciting research and curious to see how that is, what the findings of that are going to be. And then at that point, we will have a discussion with the audience and a Q&A. So if you do have questions that pop up, the best way for us to manage time is if you either put your questions into the chat or just jot them down, and we will have an opportunity to chat towards the end of the hour. And then I'll give you a little bit of updates about what's happening, what's upcoming at Luminary, and what to expect, and then we'll be on our way. So, without any further ado, I do want to introduce Aimee. So, Aimee, if you can share your screen, and the floor is yours. Oh, you're on mute. We'll just give her a second to get off of mute and get her presentation up.
Yeah, I was talking to myself and my kids.
All good. All
Yeah, I just was sharing the wrong screen at first. So now let's see. Okay, there we go. Okay, so you can see me, right? And you can see the presentation. Am I on mute still?
Yes, we can see you in the presentation.
Okay. Just
Sorry,
making
I went
sure.
on
I
mute.
can't see anything when I'm in presenting mode. Okay, just making sure. Okay. So, Tanse, everyone. I'm really honored to present here today on my research. My name is Aimee Lewis. Rodriguez is my maiden name, so I've been putting that in there to acknowledge like my journey. The presentation is really going to be focused, since it's a short presentation, on the circle of life analysis, which is what I developed during my master's. And I'm hoping to bring that into my PhD work at the University of North Dakota in the Earth System Science and Policy department. Sorry, there's a bug in my face. Okay. So introduction, this is my overview, my outline. So introduction, I'm going to talk about Nehiyawewen philosophy, the teepee, circle of life, and then finally the Turtle Island perspective, which is what my PhD is going to be focused on. So positionality is really important for Indigenous research paradigms. So I'll just start here. Here's a photo of me and my kids from 2022 at Christmas, and my little dog Shade. So I'm a lifelong learner. I'm Nehio Esqueo. I'm part of the University of Manitoba community. I work there, and I also got some grants through there through the health funding. I'm a servant of Creator and the people, and I'm a mother, auntie, and future grandmother. So I have two sets of twins. I was maiden name Aimee Rodriguez, and my husband was from Musquetees, and he passed away in 2019, and that's how I got the Lewis. So, and I'm registered from Wesquay CP First Nation in Manitoba, and my dad was Cree, and my mom's from England, and my grandfather was Jamaican. So I have a lot of diversity within my genealogy. So I'm a lifelong learner. 1 second, I'm going to tell my kids to keep it down. One moment. Oh, can I? 1 second. I'm recording. You can't talk. Go over there. I'm recording. Thank you. Sorry. So lifelong learning, syllabics, and Wakotowin. So Nehiyawewen is the Cree language, and it takes a long time to learn. So basically, I knew I was Cree my whole life, but I didn't become registered till I was 22. So in my research, I'm really looking at like not knowing your identity, finding yourself, learning your language, and connecting to that in genealogy in order to know who you are and where you came from. You can't talk. Go away. Sorry. So how I define Nehiyawewen, which is Cree people. So you see, I knew I was Cree, but I didn't have language. I didn't have land. So when we look across the globe at any like country, it's not just the country, it's also the land, right? So Cree cannot be separated between those three. So it's kind of like a little formula that I see. So Cree are 3 in 1. And this is important for later when we go on to the research. Apatala. Me, ni, gi, yi, si, ti, ri. E, p, ti, li. Me, ne, ge, ye, se, te, re. O, po, to, lo. Mo, no, go, yo, so, to, ro. A, pe, te, le. Ma, na, ga, ya, sa, ta, ra. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick. This is the syllabics that I learned in 2012 to 2014 with Ruben Quinn, who is a language carrier. Just 1 sec. There. So basically, I started in the east direction. So my teacher's saying, see how it's east for the ah sound? It takes a paradigm shift when you're learning Nehiyawewen syllabics, because we learned in school now A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's like right, left to right, linear. So my teacher says that that's linear thinking and it's algorithmic, whereas this takes lateral thinking. He says when we're learning the syllabics, we're supposed to take our dominant hand and tap our non-dominant knee, because we need to rewire our synapses in order to think Nehio. It's not easy. And like I said, I've been learning this since 2012. So basically, the east, then the south is up top, and then west, and then north. So, and then the vowels, if you just notice, they just flip directions. They're just pointing to a different way. So when you're reading sentences, it just takes a different muscle in your mind. And since I've been learning this since 2012, I see like a Nehio walk person, a Nehio Cree person. So just to quickly summarize, the east, the south, the west, and the north are the grandfather directions, and there's 4 teachings in each of those directions. The first symbol, I don't know if my mouse will show you, but right here, the first triangle in the east, are the grandfather teachings. And then the first teaching, the triangle facing towards the east, is Sagi Hituk, which means you all love one another now. And then the second syllabic in the east direction, the grandfather teaching, is Witsi Hituk, which means you all go help one another now. So there's 16 grandfather teachings, and that's east, south, west, and north. And then there's also grandmother teachings, which are southeast, southwest, northwest, and northeast. And those are 28 teachings for grandmother teachings. So it takes a life to learn these. I'm not an expert. I just memorized these back in the day. And then now the teachings are coming back to me that I'm changing a different life cycle phase. So an Indigenous research paradigm is holistic, it's subjective, it's social, it's dependent on your local ecosystem, intergenerational, and incorporates the spiritual and physical, mental and emotional. It got a little deleted there. It's also heavily reliant on elders to guide its development and transmission. So Hart wrote this in 2007, Michael Hart, from the heart of Turtle Island, like me in Winnipeg here. And the thing is I'm asserting in my research that elders, it's not heavily reliant on elders today in 2026 because children aren't with their families and they're not learning from their grandparents. If there's 12,000 plus Manitoba First Nations children in CFS. So really, an Indigenous research paradigm is heavily reliant on children, adolescents, adults, and elders. And it's important for all people, not just one age group, I guess, in 2026. So I use a dualistic approach, light and dark. If we think about it, when we have creation, there's always these dualisms, masculine, feminine, light, dark. And then also half the world, like Muslims, Christians, and Jews, believe in Genesis. And the first verse was, God, let there be light. And so it's really important to understand there's light and dark. And my research really has this dualistic approach. I use the TP as a conceptual framework, and it's very, the TP teachings are very in-depth, and it's a good land-based way to connect to Mother Earth. And also Turtle Island nations in the plains generally use the TP. And so this is what my master's research was on. It was asking, how does the TP relate to child rearing teachings across Turtle Island? Here it is again. So the bottom of the teepee is a circle, and you can see there's 15 different teachings on child rearing. The most important thing I'll point out is the tie at the top, the rope recognizes relationship, and there's 14 pins in the front of the teepee to keep intact as a family. And so we really need to think about the family unit when we think about Indigenous research paradigms. The bottom of the teepee is the circle. So my research really focuses on these 4 life stages: child, adolescent, adult, elder. The spirit is life. Here's Ruben teaching the syllabics. As you can see, he wrote the standard Roman orthography beside it, but he shies away from us learning that. Like, we only write the syllabics and then the English translation, and then we try to think of it without using the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. because we're trying to break out of that essentially. So the next part here, this is my analytical tool that I developed. Oh, and I also will say for an Indigenous research paradigm, it's more than what Hart said. It's actually like looking inwards, connecting to creator, and it's not about self. And so when I was fasting, I did fasting, spirit plates. I got my spirit name in 2011. All my kids got their spirit names. So it's just a real journey of learning who you are. And remember, Cree is land, language, and people. So really the language is important. So this is kind of what I saw when I was fasting and had a vision. And this is going to change the world. Oh, got to go back. Try again. Oh, yeah. Here we go. So this is the circle of life, like those 4 life stages. And we start in the East, and then we go to child, adolescent, adult, elder, just like I broke it down before. So this is really important for my research. I'm moving away from the medicine wheel and just going to this basic circle to show. And then we can just like use it just like a medicine wheel and put like in the East, in the South, in the West, in the North. And I say that this directionality is one of the characteristics of Turtle Island nations. So these directions that we honor, and we honor not only ourselves, but the others in the 4 directions within our ceremonies, within our language, and within how we live. So Rubin talks about the 4 philosophies, the number 4 philosophies. So basically, it's like the 4 races of men, the 4 periods of time, which is past, present, future, and eternity. There's 4 modes of communication, 4 seasons, a bunch of 4. So there's number 4 philosophies, and that's what my research is on. So I came up with this graph, and this is how I see it. I need to understand what's happening. In order to make a good decision today, I'm at the top of the triangle. And then I look back 7 generations, and then I can make a good decision today for the future. So here's me and my little life cycle on top of the generational graph, is what I call it. But I'm a half a circle, right? So I start my life cycle in the West direction because I got registered when I was 22, and it was a journey to find my community. So I'm a half a circle. So if I go back down and I look, like, did my parents go to residential schools? No, they're a full circle. And then look at my grandparents. So we can actually measure, we can quantify the dislocation of the family unit that's been happening in our communities and nations. And in order to make a good decision today, if we quantify it out to 7 generations, we can make a better decision than breaking up the family unit. So here's my example. So you see, it's the life cycle. I should start on the East, but I didn't, my dad wasn't registered, right? So he didn't become registered as an adult. So I get over here. So basically I'm an opposite person. I learned Cree in Alberta. So when I came back to Manitoba, I'm speaking a different dialect. Everything I do is opposite. And yeah, so as you can see, we could still use it like a medicine wheel. For the Turtle Island perspective, I basically see that there's egg and sperm, women and men. And in order to create a new life, we have creator's formula, which brings them both together. So you can't have a new life without the egg and the sperm. And those are the sacred seeds of creation. And so I really want to meditate on these and teach my kids about them, and like understanding like how important men's and women's teachings are. And then similarly, or I also say then, to conceive new life, we need egg and sperm. I also see it as Indigenous ways of knowing are the circle, or Turtle Island ways of knowing are the circle, and Western ways are the line. So then to conceive a new healthcare system, to conceive a new business idea, for the conception of any like economic development or growth or transformation, we need to acknowledge both. And the more we acknowledge, the stronger it'll be. And then the Turtle Island perspective. Okay, so I'm sure you guys have seen this before on a poster at the school or something. The right hand over here is the front right leg is Labrador and Quebec. Back right leg is Florida. Tail is Mexico. back left leg is California, and front is Alaska. So in order for this Turtle Island, to be healthy and whole and be able to swim and whatever, all the parts need to work together. They can't just be like a Manitoba policy over here and like all broken up. It all has to work together. And so, just like we need to have introspection during ceremonies and listening, we also have to be able to zoom out of ourselves, out of our politics and policies and all that, and just see Turtle Island as a living being. And in order for the turtle to swim and to be alive and vibrant, we all need to work together. So that's my research for the PhD. And lastly, this is the last image. So as I was telling you, I am not just a little dot over here in Manitoba. There are 7 major linguistic groups in Turtle Island. So I'm just going to quickly run through when I got my spirit name in 2011. I was in second year of medical school, and I was going to go fasting in Saddle Lake with friends because I'm from Manitoba, Wesquay CP First Nation over here, but I was ceremony over there and being born over there in Alberta. So I went and got my spirit name at 7-Star Woman. And then the elder told me a story when I got the name. He said that when he was a little kid, um, it took him 3 days to listen to the story. So 7-Star Woman, Tepicope Atakos Esqueo. And it basically means 7-star woman. And the North Star was like in the sky and was with the Big Dipper, the 7 siblings, and the North Star made the Big Dipper. And then the North Star came down and came to Turtle Island and fell in love with a mortal and then had 7 children. And those 7 children went across Turtle Island to make the 7 dialects. So we can see here Cree, Ojibwe, Blackfoot, they're all Algonquin. There's Shoshone, Sioux, the Dene or Chippewan, Apache, and Aztec Maya. So the Turtle Island perspective then is to research all these places, get their teachings. So in my research, I did a survey with 47 Indigenous Turtle Islanders from across the Turtle Island to ask them about how do TP teachings relate to childrearing, traditional childrearing ways. And so that will be for the PhD plus the qualitative interviews. Here are my references, and thank you so much for listening. I know it's a lot and it's a lifelong journey, but the answers again are we look internally, introspection to find the answers, to develop an Indigenous research paradigm, to learn about our ancestors, our history, our genealogy, who we are and where we come from. And then we also need to zoom out of ourselves to not be confined by borders and policies and the state, if that makes sense. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, this is my little, what I had as a vision for the research. And it's just the tree of life. And the roots will start growing when these teachings start going to generation, and there's no more broken circles. Hi.
Thank you,
Thank
Aimee.
you.
Thank you so much and good luck on your research. We look forward to seeing how it unfolds. I will hand it over to Dr. Tasha Brooks, who will take it from here.
Thanks, Terry Lynn. I thought I'd speak briefly just about the Indigenous Innovation Scholars Circle. So we have 3 different governing bodies here at Luminary, and this Scholars Circle is one of them. We have amazing scholars from all across Canada, and so Aimee is one of those scholars. Same with my co-presenter, Sherry Mattice. As Terry Lynn mentioned, she is in the bush, so I don't think she will be signing on today, but we meet every few months with our Scholars Circle, have applied for some grants, and they're going to be coming to the Indigenous Innovation Summit, providing opportunities for mentorship. We've got them opportunity to do case study training, and it's just a great way to connect because being in graduate studies can be really isolating. And so I will continue on with my presentation. Yes. So today we're going to be talking about post-secondary policy. So moving from managing scarcity to supporting completion through First Nations post-secondary policy. And so this is more of a practical presentation. So it's not going to be as academic, meant to support those working with First Nations communities. So Sherry and I have also developed a toolkit that we can provide any of you that might want to have that if you don't already to go along with this. And we do have an academic paper forthcoming. So we really like to take multiple approaches to our research, one being academic and one being for community, because that is the reason why we are in academia is to support our people and to create impact. And so the goal today, it's not to say that existing policies are wrong. Many First Nation policies were created under very real funding constraints. But now we have the opportunity to ask, are the rules that we've created in our policies, are they serving our students? Or are we carrying forward some of the old federal rules that previously existed from Indigenous Services Canada that no longer exist today? So jumping right in, this slide is here. It's to remind us that administrative autonomy is not the same thing as full jurisdiction. And so back in 2018, there were some changes to the post-secondary student support program. And this gave nations a lot more room to revise and manage their own policies. And this is incredibly important because the old rules were very restrictive. But the thing is that nations, like we are still operating within these very restricted funding envelopes. Our education staff, they're asked to support a growing number of student needs. And we all are familiar with the rising cost of living, childcare realities, housing shortages, and just more complex student pathways. And so here we have the challenge. We might have more authority now to shape policy, but we're still operating managing scarcity. And so that's creating this tension. Our policies, like we may want to support all of these student realities, but then we have our budgets. They're pushing us back towards this restrictive approach. And so today I want us to think about like how can our policy move closer to supporting student completion, even though we are existing under these constraints. And so that's why I want to name that elephant in the room, which is scarcity. And so um, we are existing in this under-resourced space. We know that students are like they're having these application fees. Technology is becoming a more important part of the classroom. Um, and we're given this fixed funding envelope. So if we have a scarcity-driven policy, it means that nations are needing to ration their support. And so this slide here shows us that many First Nation policies, they are under a period of transition. So we have these inherited federal constraints, with many nations still operating under this level 1 to 4 funding categories. So certificates being level 1, diplomas, bachelor's, and master's and PhD. We have these annual funding limits, as well as maintaining these maximum durations. So, for example, many nations will cap their bachelor's degrees at 48 months. And then on the other side, we see nations that are starting to create these more sovereign policy adaptations. Um, some nations are starting to cover application fees, childcare, or supporting students that are going part-time with living allowances. And so we did this analysis by looking at 76 publicly available post-secondary policies in British Columbia. So this tells us something important that nations, they are not just administering like a federal program, they are now starting to actively adopt their policies to really reflect their local needs. And so the question now begins like, how do we start to build off some of these examples? Here we're asking, are we carrying forward rules that no longer really serve us anymore? So I mentioned that 40-month cap on degrees using the level 1 to 4 categories. Some are not providing living allowance over Christmas, and some are restricting off-reserve students or students that are living outside of some certain geographical area. And these rules, they usually had an initial inherited rationale. They were used to control cost. They were used to rank which sort of degrees we were going in, or just administratively. But from a nation perspective, we can start to ask different questions. So instead of very strict time limits, could we implement more extensions or completion-based reviews? Instead of federal categories, could we align this with like nation workforce needs or our community priorities? And oftentimes those federal categories, they didn't include things like graduate certificates, which is becoming more popular now. And some nations aren't really sure, like, where does that fit in our policy? And because it's not in our current policy, we're not able to support you right now. And that isn't really a student issue. That's a policy issue that's giving us a red flag that we need to dive more into this and think how we can support our students. And so many policies, they were built around this kind of like imagined student. And that imagined student is often more fitting with like an 18-year-old who is single, who has no dependents, and studies full time in this very typical program. And they're going to complete it in a 4-year time limit, and they start in September. But our reality today is that many students do not fit that model. Many of our students are parents. They're also caregivers, or they're mature learners, or they're working and they're going to school at the same time. Um, they are very committed to their community and engaging in ceremony. And so when our policies are built to reflect this more imagined student, it it can unintentionally punish the real student, the more like general common student. And so um, you see this complexity that is starting to be built here. And this slide gives us the language to say student success, it's relational, it's very non-linear, and it's shaped by our responsibilities to our community and who we are as Indigenous people. And so this slide, this one is asking us this very important question. Um, are we funding just access or are we funding completion? Um, a scarcity-driven policy, it might fund the student at the very beginning when things are perfect, but it forces them out when life happens. Maybe they have a housing crisis. Maybe they just need to stop out temporarily. If a policy is too rigid, the student might leave. They will not have a credential. And this means that the nation, like you have already invested, but does not get a full return on that investment. And so a completion-driven policy is going to ask a question like, what small adjustments would help this student complete? What sort of leeway can we have in our policies that allows us to support this student? And sometimes flexibility is not more expensive in the long run, like over time. It might be actually protecting the nation's investment by helping students complete, get that credential, build those skills, and gain capacity. And our students are likely to come back and support our nations. So students cannot focus on school if they cannot pay rent, buy food, support their children. And so this is one of the most important policy areas because living allowance can mean the difference between staying in school and withdrawing. So the checklist on this side encourages nations to review whether their living allowance reflects some of the increases in our cost of living. Are we considering things like how many children our students have? Are we maintaining supports during breaks? Because our bills are continuing over like Christmas break. And so this isn't to say that every nation can fund everything. But it does mean the policy should be honest about real costs rather than assuming students can survive on outdated amounts. And travel is not just transportation. So for some students, they're having to relocate to go to school and travel support to go home. That could mean like supporting mental wellness, supporting family responsibilities, cultural continuity, and generally like connection to the nation. And when travel is heavily restricted, students can increase that feeling of isolation, which can then trickle over and start to impact retention. And this is especially important for students who are parents, who are caregivers. Um, a student might need to come home for ceremony, for a death, things like that. So the policy question becomes not only can we afford to support this, it also what happens if we don't support this and students are cut off from home completely? And this slide, it dives a little bit deeper into these nonlinear pathways. So part-time students are students who have to stop out for some reason, and just generally nonlinear journeys. And so many policies are geared towards a very speedy completion in continuous full-time study. And so if we take that 48-month example, the average student does not complete a bachelor's degree in 48 months. That is if everything goes through perfectly and a student is taking maximum full-time course load every single semester. And it's also assuming that they will be successful at every single course and not fail one, which does happen. And so the question here to ask ourselves is, Are we measuring success only by speed or by whether our students are able to finish? And are we keeping that data to justify that we are only going to fund you for 48 months? Or do we have our own data that says our average student takes about 55 months? And so this gives us the rationale to change our policy. Small costs can create some major drop-offs. So a student might be eligible for funding, but if they cannot afford an application fee, if their deposits don't line up, exam fees, they might not ever reach that finish line. And I have an example from my own studies. I got into the MBA. I was ready to go. The deposit was very expensive, and there was a very hard deadline on this deposit. And just the way timing works, my nation was not able to pay that deposit. And so I had to come up with I believe it was $6,000 at that time on my own. And it was tough. I just plopped that rate onto a credit card, but not everybody will have the ability to do this. So this is giving us an opportunity to look at some of these like micro barriers that might be preventing our students from even entering and finishing their studies. So local scholarships, that's another place where nations can define their success on their own terms. A lot of nations use this outdated approach of Indigenous Services Canada's suggested approach to the way that we give out scholarships. Um, why don't we start to do this in a way that is reflective to our own needs? Are we wanting to support more students to go back and do language or to get into business or trades? Whatever we need, we are now able to do. We just need to make the move to create those sort of changes. And maybe it's not all about success. Maybe we have a scholarship for people that came back despite having to pause at some sort of time, and we're giving them that extra boost to continue on. And this slide is about when students struggle. A punitive model starts with, you violated our policy. You are now being placed on this strict probation. If you miss any sort of this part of probation, you are going to lose funding and we are going to push you out of the system. A relational approach is going to ask, what happened? What sort of support do you need? What barrier popped up? Like we need to start mapping out these barriers and try to prevent this in the future. So this isn't to say that there should be no accountability at all. It's just that the accountability is to be paired with care and gathering of information so we can try to prevent this in the future. And policy renewal, this is one of my favorites. It should be informed by evidence, not by assumptions. Not saying you need some sort of complicated database. A nice starting Microsoft Excel, that is enough to begin. The goal is to track patterns and really understand where students are getting stuck, where support is needed. Do we have a whole bunch of students that are really struggling to get through one particular program? That would then give us, the flag to approach the institution. Like, we are not getting through your ECEC ever, and let's have a conversation about how we can support our students to get through. Um, is there times when we have a lot of students, not completing? Just tracking progress will help us build a better policy that is based on data. Not meant to, act as surveillance. It's to just measure whether our policy supports are helping students complete. Um, a quick win does not mean a nation suddenly has more money. It just means there may be a policy or administrative change that reduces harm without requiring this like major rebuild or new budgeting. An example might be just to clarify an appeal process. What does your current appeal process look like? Is it, 3 or 4 pages long? Is there a way that we can make this more student friendly? Can we quickly go through our policy and see where we're using outdated federal language or federal policies and make a quick change there? This change, might not solve the funding gap, but it can reduce some unnecessary barriers. And just to end this off here, I want to end with the larger strategy. So I know we are all very serious about post-secondary student success. And so the policy cannot only be this kind of like rule book. It has to be part of this fuller student success system. So was it strong advising? Is that taking place? Have we really hammered that down where our post-secondary advisors, they're right in there helping students choose a program? Did we make this move to have increased childcare supports or emergency funding? Um, and then we also really need to become familiar with like where are the students being pushed out? So without that information, education departments they're forced to make these decisions really essentially in the dark. They're left really rationing the limited funds without the evidence needed to show the true costs of student completion. So a more holistic post-secondary strategy, it starts just way before the application. It includes that full advising, these honest conversations about labor market pathways, like thinking about the end. It helps students understand admission processes and supporting with these various deadlines and reflecting, do our deadlines match with the university deadlines? Because often they don't. And how can we bridge that? Um, so the goal here, again, is not to track for the sake of tracking. The goal is to really learn from experiences to strengthen our policies to protect our students from like these avoidable barriers. Um, so I hope this was helpful, and please reach out if you want that toolkit or want any support. Me and Sherry have been in the post-sec environment for a very long time and love supporting in this area. So Heights APCA, any questions, please let me know.
Just want to acknowledge that Sherry is actually here right now. So I'm not sure if you noticed, Tasha, but
I
Sherry,
no.
welcome.
Apologies. I had to cut through a log to get onto the beach.
Sounds like fun. Um, all right. Well, we will open it up for questions for either Sherry, Aimee, or Tasha. Ellen, see your hand up. If you can just
Hi
unmute,
there. Can you hear me? I'm just going to try to get my camera working.
Yeah, we can.
we can hear you. Yeah. While she's getting her camera working, I just wanted to note that for those of you who want the toolkit, I did put Tasha's email in the chat. So if you just want to grab that and send her an email, she can get back to you with that toolkit that they worked on.
I'm
And
sorry, my camera's not going to turn on at the moment, but I did have a
fun.
couple of questions if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one would be, so it was roughly 83% of the British Columbia policies had reflected the research data that you gathered.
Mm-hmm.
So did you break it down into like the northern and remote rural communities versus the more urban ones?
We haven't dug that far into it. We just kind of kept it general for now.
Yeah. I can imagine that, if it was at a point in time broken down between the more remote rural communities versus the urban ones, you probably would see a varying degrees of some of the barriers that were mentioned.
Hmm.
Um, Another question I have is, it was my understanding that the post-secondary education policies in our First Nation communities had to at least meet the baseline minimum of what the federal government, the Indigenous Services of Canada policy stipulates. But I'm not sure if that's really mentioned or not. So there may be varying First Nation education policies that may not meet the bare minimum of what the federal government has put in their post secondary education policies.
Yes. So all of them did meet the bare minimum. So Indigenous Services Canada really has opened it up now to allowing nations to really create policies based on their own local needs. There are still a few stipulations like the maximum amount that can be spent per student and the difference between like USEP funding and post-secondary funding. But as we contrast it to what was previously required before 2018 from the government, there was so many of those old rules that related to time frames, that related to different levels, scholarships, and those no longer exist anymore. And so a lot of these policies are carrying forward these pre-2018 different sort of rules into their current policies where they could be completely removing those and basing it on their local needs.
Yeah, I wonder. I know the First Nations Education Steering Committee used to be quite active in the province of British Columbia, and I often wonder if the First Nations have that go to in terms of reaching out for support. Um, Recently, I've been working with Klahoos First Nation, looking at their education policies, and we're trying to access resources where the education department has go tos that can be that voice of that advocacy and, well, policies should be gearing towards this. I'm not sure if they're still as active as they used to be.
Yeah, so Finesk. So I previously was a post-secondary advisor back in the day, and I don't know how active they are now in the realm of supporting locally relevant policy. And so back when I was advising, it was very much geared towards this is like a template you can use.
Mm.
And so we have reached out to try to do presentations at the Finesse gathering, but we have not been accepted. So if you do have, relationships with your Finesse post-sec person, please let them know that we would love to present this data that we have collected from the province.
Yeah, of course. Just one more question, and then I'll let you go. Thank you.
Mhm.
Did you look at any of the graduation success rates? Did you do comparisons of how many of our First Nations students started and then how many were successful in their endeavors? And I don't mean
So
successful in terms of having success. I mean like the graduation completion rate.
right. So I have collected the data from 2011 to 2021, just the most recently released data. It is for a separate research project of mine, and so this post-secondary policy one is fairly early stage, but I could see how it would be completely relevant to this as well. And my later plans are to integrate it with this.
Yeah, for sure. There's lots of work I can imagine that needs to be completed. to be looked at. It's very important. So just 2 tips. One tip is if students apply to universities on open house days, application fees are typically waived. So that might be a good tip for folks that are looking at getting students' application fees down. And I'm going to put in the chat, I worked on a project with Douglas College, and it's a free online learning. It's called Indigenous Skills Seeds for Success. And it was a remake of an older program that they had. This one's online. It's beautifully illustrated, and it's helping students kind of bridge that high school level experience to post-secondary. So I
Amazing.
encourage everybody to have a look at it, and it's free. It's beautifully done. They'll come and they'll give you they will help you facilitate the program if you so desire. They're an amazing bunch of people.
Thanks for sharing that resource. Now, I do have to wrap. We have 2 minutes left, and I have a couple of more things that I wanted to share. So right now, I just wanted to give you a little bit of updates about what's happening at Luminary. We've recently launched the Charter for Change program for the for webinar, seminar. No, never mind. I'm sorry. The Charter for Change program has launched. Marnie's going to drop the link into the chat. If your institution is interested in aligning with the work that Luminary is doing to advance Indigenous inclusion with, students around around curriculum, research, networks, please take a look at that. There's just a small registration fee to join, but we have about 20 institutions that have currently joined. So if you are from an academic institution, I encourage you to take a look. We are also going to be hosting the Indigenous Innovation Summit. That's going to be co-hosted with McGill University and Desautels Faculty of Management and the Office of Indigenous Initiatives. That's taking place on September 24th to 22nd to the 24th of this year. And it's going to bring together academics and Indigenous leaders, students, elders, various people from across the world even. We have partners coming in from the US, Australia, New Zealand. So we're really excited. There's limited space. So if you are interested, take a look at the registration details and don't delay to register because we do have a limited number of seats. We also launched the 2026 Business School Indigenous Engagement Survey. And in that, we did last year's first ever benchmarking survey about where business schools are when it comes to their engagement with Indigenous communities and students. And we learned quite a bit of it. That's also available on our website under publications if you go to luminary.works if you want to take a look at it. But what's exciting about year 2 is that we're now going to be able to have some analysis data where we're going to be able to see where has improvement been made when it comes to number of courses being delivered in business schools that have Indigenous curriculum, number of partnerships with communities where they're working on research. So very excited about that. If you haven't received it or you want your institution to participate, you can email Tasha. Her email is already in there. She's the lead of this project at Luminary. So feel free to reach out for her and she will make sure that you get into contact. We also are on LinkedIn, Luminary Network. That's the name of us. If you want an update on everything that we're working on, all of that information is available on there as well. And then now I'm going to go over to the next slide. We do have a couple of questions, just 2 questions, completely anonymous, but it helps us with our funder where they ask us to gather some EDI questions and just one question about knowledge. So the first question is up now. I'll give everybody a couple of seconds. I really appreciate it if you take the time to do that before you go. I know we're 1 minute over. But the first question is just a simple yes, no, or maybe. And then Marnie will advance to the second question, and that's just EDI information. Like I said, totally anonymous and voluntary, but we do appreciate if you do participate. And with that, I will close today's webinar and thank you all for attending and for the conversation. I know I wish we had a little bit more time, but it was very informative. Thank you to the speakers who took time out of their day to join us, and I wish you all a great afternoon. Namoltas.